Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. It is a busy couple days in Fayetteville. Not just because John Calipari has another Final Four potential national championship contender. Arkansas football, it is, it's the biggest story in college football right now, right? So if you listen to Sunday's show, we went live at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And I said from the beginning, I said, we're on Sam Pittman watch. We don't know what's going to happen. We will keep you updated. If something happens during the show, we'll react to it. And then, of course, if something doesn't happen, we'll come back later. Well, naturally, Hunter Yurachek was watching the show. He clearly did not want the smoke that Torres was going to deliver. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. But minutes after we got off air, Arkansas did fire Sam Pittman. On that day, we did some reaction. We talked about Sam Pittman. We don't have to revisit all of that here. But listen, I hope Sam Pittman, if he does decide to retire, enjoys it. I thought it was actually pretty noble of him. I know he didn't give up a ton of money, but did take a little bit less than he could have in that buyout. I think he really does want what's best for Arkansas. And whatever his next chapter is, I wish him well. And I think we need to give him credit for re-elevating the program after what was a disastrous era before him. With that said, it is time to look ahead. And just in the less than 48 hours since Sam Pittman was fired, a lot has gone on at Arkansas. By the way, make sure you're following our Torres on the Hogs Twitter page, Torres on the Hogs, for all your late-breaking Arkansas news. Charlie is one of our interns who does a great job helping me with that. Torres on the Hogs. So with that said, question becomes, okay, Torres, I know Sam Pittman was fired, but what happened? Well, I think there's been a few things that have happened, some very public, some kind of happening behind the scenes, and I believe there is very much a lead candidate emerging. I want to go ahead and discuss it because it's got some interesting new twists. Leaders emerging, and I think there's some stuff happening. First of all, in terms of what's new, a couple things. One, Monday, this is already a little bit of old news at this point. So Bobby Petrino, we knew was going to be the interim head coach. And Bobby Petrino, I'll tell you this man knows I got one shot left in my life to become a full-time permanent SEC head coach, and I ain't letting anybody screw it up, okay? So he does a press conference on Monday, whatever, and then goes into the coaching office, and basically it was just like he pulled the old that clip from the movie. I forget what movie it was even called, but Dave Chappelle. He's like, "You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. You're cool. You're fired. You're fired." And I know we shouldn't be making light of the fact that people did lose their jobs, families' lives were uprooted. But this is also a results-based business. You have assistant coaches making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they simply weren't doing the job on the defensive end of the defensive side of the football. And Bobby Petrino has no loyalty to those guys. And so I'll be honest, I did think changes were going to come. I didn't know they were going to come quite in the manner they did, as he basically wiped out the entire defensive coaching room on Monday morning. But again, I don't mean to make light of people losing their jobs. But the counter to that is the defense was not living up to its end of the bargain. I go back to the Notre Dame game a couple days ago, and I say, I expected the defense to maybe have its best effort of the season against Notre Dame coming off Memphis. Instead, they had their worst. It's clear they either weren't being coached well, they weren't being prepared well, or they weren't responding to it. And so it was time for everybody to move on. So with that said, that happens. I think there was one other interesting note, and then I want to get to some updates on candidates, okay? The interesting note to me is, again, there was a press conference. Bobby Petrino spoke. I do think it's worth noting that Hunter Yurachek, the AD, was asked about, his role in the next head coaching search. And I think this is important. I know if you're not an Arkansas fan, it's a little bit of minutia and in the weeds. But I'll tell you this, I live in LA. UCLA is looking for a new head football coach. And I can tell you behind the scenes, they haven't officially fired the AD yet, but they've put together this search committee. And I've been told that essentially the UCLA AD has no power over who the next football coach will be. And so I bring it up because that's been the question in Arkansas. Is the AD that brought in Sam Pittman, the AD who, oh, by the way, just a week or two ago said, yeah, we're not really built to compete at the top of college football right now? Is Arkansas really going to let him make this next head coaching hire? And I think it's especially important because if the AD says we're not built to win in the SEC, one, certainly not a great message to send to candidates. I think that goes without saying. But then two, why are you led to believe that this guy is going to make a good hire or the right hire or is even in position to make hire? Because, oh, by the way, if the football position isn't built to succeed at the top of the sport, that falls on you. Whose job is it? I mean, it's Sam Pittman's job to coach, but to put resources together, to put whatever together to compete at the highest level, that is on the AD. And so it'll be interesting. But Hunter Yurachek, the AD, did say that as far as he knows, I believe that was the quote almost verbatim, as far as he knows, he will be the one making the head coaching selection. I don't know that I fully believe that. I don't even know if that's fully been decided yet, but we will see what his future looks like in the coming days. With that said, I did promise some big new twists, and I will say this. We talked about candidates on Sunday, but it does feel to me like there is a big name emerging as the, I would say, favorite for the job. Now, I wouldn't say he's the favorite. There's not 100% approval rating. This isn't Jim Harbaugh at Michigan or something like that, but there is a name that is emerging. And I think there's also a couple names that maybe I didn't give enough credence to on Sunday when I did the candidates piece that I think are starting to come out of the woodwork. And so I want to go ahead and jump in. I want to go ahead and discuss them. And I want to go ahead and start with a report from Bruce Feldman. Okay, so Bruce Feldman, College Football Insider Forever, Fox Sports, and The Athletic, he put out a piece on Sunday. You know, what firing happens, every website in America has their coaching candidates list ready to go. And so I just bring it up because Bruce Feldman did put out a list of coaching candidates, and he teased it. It was at The Athletic. It was behind a paywall. But he put up a tweet that said this as follows. He said, quote, Sam Pittman is out. Industry sources told The Athletic some key Razorback money folks want to bring SMU's Rhett Lashlee back to Arkansas. More on that and who else may be in the mix. All right, so Bruce Feldman, who is plugged in, especially in the agent world, says that he believes Rhett Lashlee is the favorite, and there are key money people behind Rhett Lashlee. Now, I'll say this. We don't generally share stuff behind a paywall, but a basic Google search, you go to any of your websites, any of your favorite college football websites will basically tell you what the article said. So let's go ahead and get to Saturday Down South, talking about Bruce Feldman's article with a little bit of insight on who may be pushing for Rhett Lashlee. This is from Saturday Down South. I believe it was Monday morning. Said, quote, the Arkansas job will certainly garner interest from certain head coaches and top assistants from around the country. One leading candidate, according to the Athletics' Bruce Feldman, is SMU coach Rhett Lashlee. Okay, so we know that part. Question is, where's the money coming from? Per Feldman's report, this is on Saturday Down South, Lashlee has the, quote, support of Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, who is a former Razorback himself and an Arkansas booster. The report goes so far as to say Jones is squarely behind the effort to get Lashlee in charge of Arkansas football. So one, that's certainly interesting. The timing is certainly interesting because Jerry Jones was certainly in the news on Sunday, and not for anything Arkansas related, as Micah Parsons returned to Dallas as a member of the Green Bay Packers. But I just bring it up because it certainly makes things interesting. It's certainly unique. And listen, Jerry Jones has, my understanding, been kind of hands-off with, I don't want to say he's been hands-off, but hasn't been as hands-on with Arkansas athletics. Now, remember when John Calipari got the basketball job, there was a report, I think, was it, he donated X amount of money to NIL, X amount of money to this, X amount of money to that. But I think that's certainly interesting. And what I will say is this. Rhett Lashlee is certainly a candidate. By the way, for anyone that's not an Arkansas fan that's coming in that's saying, why would Rhett Lashlee leave SMU? Well, we'll get into that in a minute. But what I think is important to note, from the state of Arkansas, played for Gus Malzahn in high school, coached at Arkansas as a young assistant coach. And so it's a homecoming opportunity. Now, the big question with Rhett Lashlee, and we did talk about this on Sunday's, reaction to the firing, but also it's going to be a conversation between now and whenever Arkansas names its head coach is, would Rhett Lashlee actually leave the SMU job for Arkansas, right? And I've already seen a lot of different things about Rhett Lashlee and about would he leave. Listen, what I would say is this. I think there's only one person in the world that knows if Rhett Lashlee would actually leave the job. That is Rhett Lashlee. And certainly, his inner circle. But what I do think is we have to be fair, because I've seen a lot of this in the NIL era. SMU is the better job than Arkansas. Well, first of all, both have a ton of money. And I think what's notable about Arkansas and important is pretty straightforward. The money is there at Arkansas. You have to get the right person in place that is going to motivate the boosters and give them a reason to support the program. Give you a random side story, but I remember during basketball hiring this past spring, NC State fired its coach, and it was like, well, how much NIL do they actually have? Then they hired Will Wade. Everybody was super excited, and Will Wade got a crap ton of money to go to war in the portal in NIL. I know it's a little bit different because that was pre-rev share. We now have rev share, but it doesn't change the fact that you are going to need support from outside boosters, outside corporations, outside NIL. And so it's just going to take the right person. So don't tell me about all of SMU's money. I know SMU has a ton of money. Guess what? Arkansas has a ton of money as well. Beyond that, and I think this is the important part, ACC versus SEC. You could argue that in the hierarchy of the ACC, SMU is closer to the best job in the ACC than Arkansas is to the best job in the SEC. You can argue it, whatever, debate, discuss amongst yourselves at the water cooler, okay? What I will say, because I think this part is important, is that I think you can also argue that any job in the Big Ten or the SEC is essentially better than any job in the ACC. Now, maybe you could argue Florida State or Clemson or whatever, but the truth of the matter is we have to use that as context. The ACC, it's holding on by a thread right now, okay? It is not, listen, what I'll say with this is the ACC. Everyone's saying the right things right now, but as we discussed over the summer, 2030, it sounds like it's, at some point in the future when there's going to be flying cars and, whatever. 2030 isn't that long away. And that's when those buyouts drop in the ACC TV contract. And if you don't think that North Carolina and Clemson and Florida State and these schools that are positioning, that have the potential to leave and potential to have a good landing spot are positioning themselves right now, you're out of your mind. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I wouldn't put it at 0% either. And so SMU sounds great right now, but what's the future of the ACC? And if the ACC breaks up, and if, let's just say, Clemson and Florida State leave, where does that leave everybody else? And what are we talking about them as a conference? And so these are all things that coaches have to weigh. Conference affiliation, where we are now, where we are going to be 5 years from now. What about NIL, this and that? So these are all things that need to be figured out. And I think they need to be figured out only by Rhett Lashlee. And what I would say about it is, again, these are questions that if Hunter Yurachek is doing the hiring, darn it, he better have an answer for. He better be able to explain why he said that Sam Pittman was not given the resources needed to succeed, and why he can change that for the next guy, or he's not going to get anybody. Now, with that said, we've talked a lot already about the Arkansas job. We've talked a little bit about Rhett Lashlee. I did see a second tweet, though, because, again, the conversation about Rhett Lashlee, is he a legitimate candidate? Is he not a candidate? Would he leave a very good ACC job for a questionable SEC job? I saw something interesting that I think is at least worth discussing, okay? So I think if you're a college sports fan, you're at least tangentially familiar with the name Tom Mars, okay? So Tom Mars is a very prominent lawyer who basically, he has the NCAA over the curb, over a barrel, and he's just spanking them with a paddle over and over and over again. He's the guy, listen, I hate to do it, but, when Ole Miss fired Houston Nutt, Tom Mars was kind of consulting or something. He was the one that discovered Hugh Freeze, who I do like, but Hugh Freeze was maybe making some phone calls on his personal or his work cell phone that he should. That was Tom Mars who discovered that. That was his law firm who discovered it, led to Hugh Freeze's firing, but also a lot of other stuff since then. Shea Patterson, remember, he was at Ole Miss. He wants to transfer. The NCAA says you got to sit out. He hires Tom Mars. He's playing the next year at Michigan. And basically, I think you can argue that a lot of where we are in college sports today is because of Tom Mars. Why do I bring it up? Well, he's an Arkansas native, or I don't know if he's an Arkansas native, but he lives in Arkansas right now. He practices in Arkansas right now. And he did put out an interesting tweet that I absolutely think is relevant in the conversation of, would Rhett Lashlee take the job? Is he interested? Producer Matt, you could put up Tom Mars' tweet. So remember, this is a prominent lawyer. This guy is not hanging out on Twitter like he's 17 years old. Whatever. Tom Mars tweeted out on Sunday night, prominent lawyer, as best I can tell, he runs his own Twitter account. He said, I've known Rhett Lashlee and his family, and this was in reference to the Arkansas job opening up. Tom Mars says, I've known Rhett Lashlee and his family since Rhett was a kid. If Arkansas wants to hire one of its own, and integrity is important to the Board of Trustees, they would never find anyone with the higher standards of integrity and better leadership skills than Rhett Lashlee. But we'll see. So maybe to most of you, that means nothing. To me, I don't know that it means nothing, and let me explain why. The reason I don't believe it means nothing is pretty straightforward. It's because of the fact that Tom Mars, listen, smart guy, obviously, lives in the state of Arkansas, or at least practices law in the state of Arkansas. And I think as importantly, and this is important, has a personal relationship with Rhett Lashlee. And so let me ask you this. If you have friends, if you have family, if you have people in your life that you want to help, you do what you do. You make a phone call on their behalf. You write a letter of recommendation on their behalf. Maybe you tweet on their behalf. I don't know. What I also know is this. If your friend or somebody that you care about or know or have a personal relationship is not interested in something, the one thing you do not do is publicly put your support behind them, because what ends up happening? You just put that person in a bad situation, and then you usually get a phone call like, dude, why'd you tweet that? Now I got to answer to this. I got to answer that. And so to me, Tom Mars, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say, is one of the most important people in the state of Arkansas. I don't think that's hyperbolic. Big name in college sports, and he's known Rhett Lashlee since he was a kid. And so to me, if Rhett Lashlee does not want that job, if he has zero interest, he just wants to coach SMU, never wants to leave, I don't think he has a personal friend of his. I don't think a personal friend of his puts that out. And so the fact that it was put out, I'm just saying, I'm starting to think that maybe it either came from Rhett Lashlee, or Rhett Lashlee doesn't hate that he is getting support from somebody. And here's the other thing. Tom Mars, again, lives in the state of Arkansas. This isn't one of those, put this out so I can get a raise at the place that I'm happy at. And so, because again, it just puts Tom Mars in a bad. If Tom Mars is not putting out that tweet, if he knows Rhett Lashlee is just using it as leverage to get a new contract at his current job. So I think there's interest in Rhett Lashlee. I will say I tried to find this morning that audio. Remember Paul Feinbaum, Senator Paul Feinbaum, maybe even? Remember that Paul Feinbaum clip? Producer Matt, who does not live in Alabama anymore, but is from Alabama, did not like that little jab there. But Senator Paul Feinbaum, over the course of the summer, was hosting Sports Talk Radio and did reference like, Rhett Lashlee is working behind the scenes to get that job. And so I just bring it up because to me, it just doesn't feel like someone of Tom Mars's stature, who, again, doesn't tweet a lot. He's not active online 24 hours a day. I don't think he puts that out if Rhett Lashlee does not at least have some interest in the job. So we'll see what happens. A couple more thoughts. By the way, Producer Matt, if we have any good questions or comments about this coaching search, feel free to pop them up when I call for them. But a couple other things that I have heard over the last couple of days. One, I did see Brett Favre. We did not pull this tweet, by the way, but Brett Favre is on Team Torres. Brett Favre publicly advocated for John Gruden. Now, again, I don't really see. It doesn't feel like Gruden is getting as much traction as, frankly, I thought that he would. It doesn't mean that he shouldn't. It just means that he doesn't appear to be. That's who I've said it before. John Gruden said, I would, quote, die to coach in the SEC. Sorry, that's the dude that I want to go to war with. And I think he creates so much interest and excitement. But again, it feels like maybe there's not as much momentum as I thought. But I do think it is interesting that Brett Favre, of all people, remember Brett Favre was, I believe Gruden was his quarterbacks coach maybe for the Packers a million years ago. But Gruden, again, I don't think if Gruden had zero interest in the job, Brett Favre is tweeting that, but we'll see. A couple other names, by the way, that maybe I didn't give enough credence to over the course of the episode on Sunday. I didn't talk at all about Dan Mullen. I have been told, I think Dan Mullen's working hard behind the scenes to put himself in the conversation, or his representation is. I think there's pluses and minuses to that, like everybody else. I think Dan Mullen's pitch is, hey, couple things. One, I took, what would be considered an off the beaten path program in the SEC and led them to success. That was obviously Mississippi State. Remember, they got them to #1 in the country. They almost made a 4-team playoff. So if there had been a 12-team playoff that year, they would have been in the playoff. And I think his pitch is, I'm 4-0 at UNLV right now. I'm having success. I did it at Mississippi State. I think the other part of his pitch is like, have you seen Florida since I left? You think I was the problem at Florida? You think I was the problem? I was the solution? I think there's pluses and minuses. I do think that towards the end, Dan Mullen was struggling, wasn't recruiting at the level needed to succeed. So there's a lot of fair conversations about Dan Mullen on both sides. But I've been told behind the scenes he has been working his butt off to get this job. I think John Summerall maybe is a little bit higher than I perceived. Now, I will mention, and I did mention this on Sunday, John Summerall is going to be a priority candidate at any SEC job that opens. The Tulane head coach, remember all of his ties. So he's from the state of Alabama. So if it goes sideways at Auburn, he's probably going to be Auburn's #1 candidate. He played at Kentucky, was a longtime assistant coach at Kentucky. He is certainly going to be the #1 candidate at Kentucky, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And I'll say this too. He was also an assistant at Ole Miss, and we don't expect Ole Miss to open. But if Lane Kiffin somehow gets that Florida job, then Ole Miss could open and he would be the #1 candidate there as well. So John Summerall, I think, is going to be, Lane Kiffin said it last week. John Summerall is going to be coaching in the SEC. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. But I think the ties make more sense to other places more so than Arkansas. But the counter to that is, what if Arkansas is the only SEC job that opens? What if Mark Stoops refuses to negotiate that buyout? What if Hugh Freeze goes on a winning streak here, which I don't think any Auburn fan, including the one producing this show, expects to happen? Anyway, the only point I'm trying to make, Summerall's maybe a little bit more of a priority than I thought he would be. But again, his ties are, negligible at best at Arkansas. Last thing I will say, we'll see who ends up making the hire. I have been told, though, by multiple people, I think, we're not trying to make this a basketball segment, but I do think the pizzazz and the excitement that John Calipari has brought to the basketball program, I think that's weighing in this search. Is John Calipari, with the help of Eric Musselman, I don't want to undersell what Eric Musselman did 3 straight second weekends, but Arkansas is now a national brand because of its basketball program, and they've gone to another level under John Calipari. They're playing in these huge games. They'll play against Duke on Thanksgiving, Houston right before Christmas, and it's just a national talking point. And so I think the people who are ultimately going to make this decision, and this is kind of why I don't know if Hunter Yurachek, is really going to be involved. I think they're sitting there saying, is there a football equivalent of John Calipari that can create excitement, that can make us a national story? Again, that's part of the reason why I personally like Gruden, but I just bring it up because that is certainly a conversation to have. Tell you what, before we get to break, I do want to mention just again, as always, we're going to be pumping out a crap ton of content over the course of the next few weeks. Do me, well, you don't have to do me a favor, but I just want you to think about, we do have the membership option for the Torres pod, the membership option. All you got to do is click join on the homepage. I think maybe this week we'll do our first members only, either live chat or short stream, talk a little bit about everything that's going on. And I should mention this as well. Some of you have signed up for membership. By the way, it's $4.99 a month. We'll start creating a little bit more content around that. I want to keep most of the show free, but if you just want to support the show, we would appreciate your support there. And what I will also say is this. I think what we're going to start doing is we're going to have a member of the month. Today's member of the month is Jesse White, who I actually believe is an Arkansas fan. Jesse, if you're watching, Jesse, if you're listening, that's what I need you to do. Email me, Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com. Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com. We have a special offer for you. But again, you want to help support the show. It really does go a long way. It's $4.99 a month. That's the cost of, it's less than a beer that you get at happy hour on Friday. So just click that join button at the top of the screen. And I think we're going to do our first members only stuff this week. By the way, one more thing on Arkansas. Wes Moore, who broke the John Calipari to Arkansas story, I believe will be joining me later in the week as well.